Yeah. But I mean, so yeah, we kind of grew up in the same generation. So I'm guessing, like you probably got in on the Super Nintendo Street Fighters, of course the arcade Street Fighters. That was 1992 World Warrior and all that stuff. What is your gaming background? And were you somebody who had like all the consoles, like, or were you somebody who had one console and was jealous that somebody else had the other console?
Envious friend that everybody had.
And that's stories I've always wanted to talk about. Like, I have a rich history. I have two older brothers and an older sister. My oldest brother, they don't really game anymore. He's huge into VR. Omar, he's 52. He's 10 years older than me. We would play ColecoVision, Atari, Nintendo. The first memory that I remember at like 6 years old was always shutting off my brother's Zelda on NES and ruining his save file.
Wow.
Only for him to try and beat me up and my mom stop him. Like, no joke.
That's messed up,
Or even
man.
Gyromite with the Rob the Robot. I remember that, very faintly. But I used to go to arcades because of my older brothers. So I remember the Sega holographic game that they had, it was a big circular tube.
Oh, I think I know
Street Fighter
this.
1 with the two buttons. Like, so I was thrown into arcades as a kid. And then through the 90s, as I became like, 12, 13, 14, I'd go to an ice skating rink. I used to play hockey. And every Friday was like the hangout. It was called Rock on Ice. No longer exists. But they would have like a Mortal Kombat 1 machine, a Street Fighter 2. And so I would just go to the arcades. The McDonald's, I have the world's biggest McDonald's still less than 2 miles from my house. Back then, that McDonald's had the first like Street Fighter Champion Edition. The malls did.
Even McDonald's.
McDonald's with an arcade?
Wow.
What? Okay.
It had it had Killer Instinct, Virtual Fighter. They still have it, but it's every arcade in America is like redemption games unless it's a specific thing. But I just played the hell out of it because my older brothers, and then the way I knew I was a competitor is, as most people know, I won the first ever Blockbuster video game challenge. I still have the trophy upstairs. It's the thing that Dr. Disrespect says he's the 2-time. I'm actually the real life winner of the first one ever on just Super Nintendo.
Oh.
And the story about it, and there's a YouTube video of the actual event that Blockbuster made after it happened to explain to future like stores how to run the tournament. And so that's like the first footage outside of the Nintendo 90 championships from 93 of me being like one of the world's first esports champions technically.
Yeah. That's a crazy story. I haven't heard the word Blockbuster in a long time. I mean, growing up,
that's
I don't know if you had that in Australia.
Had Blockbuster
you guys had Blockbuster
yes,
as well.
Yes.
Okay, so like Blockbuster was like, where you can rent for listeners who are, not super old like we are. Blockbuster is basically a place where you can rent movies, but they also had games that you could rent, right? And so this was a way where you can like play all the newest games without like spending like tons of money. You'd have to spend like, I think inflation adjusted, it was like $100 for like a Super Nintendo game and stuff like that. So like I remember there was a Chrono Trigger was one of the games that I couldn't buy, but I could rent. Right. And I remember I would rent it with a friend. And we would hope that our saved game was still there from the last week that we rented it.
I see.
We got it like a couple of times in a row, but then like eventually we're like, oh, okay, we lost our saved game. But it's
maybe overwritten or something, right?
But Blockbuster is they had a clay fighter tournament. I think I don't know if
that was the second year. I can tell you every single game. So Blockbuster. So the first year I entered, it was mostly like East Coast. And you had to play either Super Nintendo or Genesis. I went Super Nintendo. It was Tasmania. Second game was Super Star Wars. And each week they just took your high score. You had 3 minutes to get the highest score you could. So Tasmania, I was like 30th in the store. Super Star Wars the second week, and you didn't know the game until the following week, like a week before, and people would like rent them out to practice and shit. So you either had to buy the game or whatever. It wasn't a surprise, but you had a couple days notice, right? I think so. And so the second week was like Super Star Wars. I had like 50th place. And then the third week was Street Fighter 2 Turbo on Super Nintendo.
Oh,
and my brothers had just bought it for the $80 that it was. I remember from a KB, it was like Toys R Us at the time, or KB Toy Store. Before GameStop, there's EB Games, Babbage's. And that was actually my first job ever, was at Babbage's, which today is GameStop. I worked there for like a year at 16. And then I worked at Blockbuster. But we had Super Nintendo. There's no internet. Prodigy.net was starting to come out. So you had to just, on instinct, know how to play these games.
Yeah.
So I'm going home and I'm playing 11 years old. And I discover that I can just throw 3 fireballs with Ken, get the computer dizzy every time. You had 3 minutes basically to go through the PC or the computer CPU. And I threw 3 fireballs. They would get dizzy. I'd jump in Fierce Punch, jump Fierce Punch, Fierce TP, and almost death every time.
And
then repeat, throw fireballs. So I literally got like 9 perfects in a row.
Wow.
And because of the score, they actually used the point system across all 3 games. My point system, because of that one game, made me the #1 in the entire country for Street Fighter.
Nice.
So
high score system. Yes.
It was a high score system of the 3 games with a timer. And so what happened was it basically skyrocketed my score. I went to the finals, which was like Magic Johnson slam dunk basketball at Disney World.
Okay.
And the video that I can link to you guys later has that footage. You can B-roll it in if you'd like.
Nice.
See me as a little shit like, I won! Somebody hug me! You know, what you call it. But and then it was Super Magic. And then the first game I remember, it was a single elimination bracket. So I'm from the streets.
Okay.
And it was like the first person I played, I barely won by like 3 points. But something just possessed me, and I literally destroyed everyone by 20 points or more because I found another glitch. And I'm like that kid in The Wizard. You can pump fake the CPU, and every time you pump faked him, right, he would jump to block. You run around dunk. And that game was impossible to score 3-pointers. Like one kid won a game with a 3-pointer at the last second. I just kept pump faking, dunking, rinse, repeat.
It's a better strategy.
I've never lost a game in NBA Jam in 25 years, which is actually not a joke. So I won that. I got to go to, and this is what made me fall in love with Street Fighter, not just because I played it with my brothers all the time, but when I won that year, it was a free trip for 4. I took my 2 brothers and my mom to San Francisco to go to Game Pro, the magazine studio.
Oh, Game Pro. So sick.
Yeah, EA Games. So EA Sports.
Yeah.
Anyways,
It's in the game, yeah.
And then the third one was Capcom Studio.
Nice.
And when I was at Capcom, I have a picture. It's somewhere in one of my drawers. There's a picture of me playing a Super Nintendo with the beta of Super Street Fighter 2, New Challengers.
Wow.
And it wasn't a cartridge. It was my first time ever seeing like development.
Right.
It was a giant like motherboard plugged into the Super Nintendo, like a dev kit.
Oh.
And I just was like, this is my passion, my love. And then I just started growing up in arcades and competing. And what sucked about Blockbuster, the next year was Clay Fighter, NBA Jam, and something else. My score was #1. I went to the finals again. I had to get disqualified because my family wanted to go to Lebanon, the Middle East where I'm from. And I'm crying like a little bitch, man. I'm like, I'm going to win again, Dad. He's like, you have to go spend time with him. I'm like, no. And that's where my dad literally said, you can't win everything. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you mofo, I'm going to win everything, you know? So, but that's my history. You know, it's funny. What also helped me at the first one I won, my dad goes, if you beat this next guy, I'm going to give you $50 cash.
Ooh.
Back then, that was a lot.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I was an 11-year-old kid where I'd get like $5 for lunch money, but like $50, I was like, and that was where money matches got in my head. And then, the rest is history. But thanks to my brothers, just playing everything. It ran in my family, dude. My brothers, we'd go to local places that had like pinball tournaments, and they would win those while I was winning like just whatever other cheesy game was there. And just, it's a competitive thing. I think obviously all our best Street Fighter players come from that arcade era until you come into the world of like the punks, the dudes and all that just leveled up by cheating using pads and not actual fight sticks. But,
Whoa, calling him
pads. Pad players. We got pad
but I mean,
players
no, it's
now.
easier access. Like I tell people,
Yeah.
I would beat 90% of my opponents if they were on the same like controller as me. But I can't hold it against them for being able to learn leverless, which I try. My mind of 30 years of a stick, I can't do it.
Same.
Yeah.
It's really hard to adjust. And pad players, like I know the theory behind why pad players have the advantage, but I can never prove it because I'm not that efficient in.
Yeah,
using the pads,
it is what you're used to. But I mean, I think for me, like Super Nintendo Street Fighter 2 kind of got me to play on pad by force almost because I only had pad, right? If you look at Tekken players, a lot of the top Tekken players are pad players because of PlayStation, right? So there's kind of
Tekken
like
3 came out.
Yeah, but like with Street Fighter players, there's definitely more of a emphasis on the classic lever, a Moss stick. I noticed in the back that you have there looks like some Moss sticks in the